Federal authorities arrested an alleged leader of the Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13 gang, in Prince William County, Virginia on Thursday. He was located just outside of Washington, D.C. The FBI identified the 24-year-old man as Henry Jose Villatoro Santos, one of the top 3 leaders of the Salvadorian gang.
Attorney General Pam Bondi said he was living in the U.S. illegally and was head of the gang's East Coast operations.
FBI Director Kash Patel responded to my question on the matter at a press conference yesterday morning.
How long was this individual living in the United States illegally and operating as a leader of MS-13?
The bottom line is for far too long. And because of operational security, we won't get into too many of the details about this individual. But if you're here for a minute, a day, a month, or a year, you've been here far too long.
President Donald Trump touted the arrest, writing on Truth Social, "Just captured a major leader of MS-13. Tom Homan is a superstar."
This comes just weeks after the U.S. dropped charges against another MS-13 leader, Cesar Lopez Larios, in order to deport him instead to El Salvador through a deal with the country's president, Nayib Bukele.
On Wednesday, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem visited the El Salvador prison holding Venezuelans who have been deported from the U.S. for being alleged gang members. Noem shared this video message in front of a cell holding some of those prisoners.
Here at CCOT today and visiting this facility. And first of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
Noem is being blasted for what some are calling a prison photo op. Activist John Pavlovitz wrote on Blue Sky, "If hell exists, Kristi Noem is a shoo-in." The Homeland Security Secretary is also being attacked for her wristwatch. Media company Midas Touch posted on X, "It appears that Kristi Noem may have worn a $60,000 Rolex during her visit to the El Salvadoran prison camp today." Media consultant Stuart Stevens shared on Blue Sky, "Kristi Noem is pretty much the definition of white trash."
Jeez.
Well, let's get to your question, first of all,
in
this broader case of the MS-13 alleged gang leader. Good for you to get that question into Kash Patel. He didn't give a very definitive answer. Do you have some inside track on how long this guy was here, or was it a genuine open question?
It was a genuine open question. I mean, based on what they told us during that briefing, it suggested to me that he has been here for quite a while. They said that he was recruited when he was pretty young. He's still young, 24. And had been running operations for the gang on the East Coast for a while now. So I would venture probably a couple of years, but Kash Patel said basically we can't give you too many details because there's still elements of the operation that are private and secure, and they don't want to jeopardize future operations as well. So I understand why he was a little bit cagey, but obviously I always want a direct answer to a question,
Sure.
so it's a little disappointing. But yeah, it was a really interesting press briefing. Again, this is just outside of D.C., only about 15 minutes from where I live, actually, in Virginia.
Oh, okay.
So I was quite thrilled that they got this gang leader.
Yeah. A crime centre near where you live. We don't like that. Alleged crime centre.
Alleged crime. Well,
we should say.
There's a lot of rumors about Woodbridge, and I won't. People who are from the area know the nickname for it. I won't say it on air, but
Okay, fair enough. Well, in relation, was there anything else that emerged from that news conference that we should know about?
Well, they talked about their new partnership with the state of Virginia, and I imagine they're doing this with a lot of states around the country where federal agencies like the FBI, the DOJ, and ICE are cooperating more closely with state and local police, and Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin was there as well. And he talked about the 287G program, which is a way to deputize state and local police officers to carry out identification and start the deportation process for illegal aliens, which basically takes some of the burden off of ICE, which could be stretched thin during a mass deportation operation. And meanwhile, just across the Potomac in Maryland, the Maryland State House is mulling a bill that would reverse the 287G program. A bunch of Maryland sheriffs actually released a video earlier this week saying that they oppose that bill because they found that it's been such a huge benefit to them and their cooperation with ICE to be able to have those officers deputized.
I think that gets into a whole other interesting debate about what is sometimes sort of broadly labelled sanctuary cities, which is the issue of dividing immigration enforcement from regular policing. And the argument in favour of the separation is if someone who's in the country illegally witnesses or has information about a crime, you want that person to be able to report that crime without being in fear of deportation. And I think that is at least a valid argument to make on its
Yeah,
face.
and the police would their argument against that would be that their means of identifying illegal aliens and then referring them for deportation is typically through arrest. So they wouldn't want to take a witness who is reporting a crime. They recognize that oftentimes illegal aliens can be disproportionately victims of crimes because of the lack of reporting. So they're focused on if we are arresting someone who has been accused of a crime and we find out that they're not a U.S. citizen, that would be a great opportunity to start the deportation process. And what a sanctuary city does, as you know, but just for the viewers who might not, it means that the local police are not allowed to cooperate with ICE. So if they have someone in custody that they've arrested, they cannot then alert ICE or hold the individual in prison or jail or what have you while they wait for ICE to come pick them up for deportation. So it leads in some cases to accused criminals of being released back into the public, and then it becomes harder to find them.
I think we ought to include Kristi Noem in this before
Yeah,
we
of course.
before we run out of time. So first of all, just to distance myself from one of the Liberal comments that was read out, I don't really approve of calling anybody white trash.
Agreed, I was going to say the same.
Or personal kind of insults of that
That's
nature.
something that we're allowed to say about ourselves. When other people call someone else white trash, that's no good.
No, exactly. It's sort of insulting and,
Right.
and excessive. Now, there is a separate argument, obviously, about the deportation of these people to El Salvador and to Kristi Noem's video, which we showed there. Nobody regrets, I think, the deportation of criminals or the deportation of proven gang members. I think the issue here is the lack of proof or the lack of due process provided, and the willingness of Kristi Noem to make that video, which to my mind, and I'm well aware you will disagree, but to my mind is sort of celebrating a kind of cruelty, really, or a kind of incarceral power over these people. And we're already seeing lawyers for some of these people protest pretty vehemently that they have been deported unjustly. One instance is a former professional soccer player and coach who has a tattoo that he says pertains to a soccer club, and I guess deportation authorities say otherwise. There's another instance of a 31-year-old makeup artist who is gay, who his lawyer says he fled Venezuela out of fear of anti-gay persecution. The gentleman in question has quite a few photos online, which I think would be fair to say don't fit the stereotype of Tren de Aragua members. And so the worry is that these people are being deported wrongfully with no opportunity to assert their innocence in a meaningful way. And then we're seeing images like this.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, they have the opportunity after the deportation, so they are allowed to go to an immigration court and actually protest the facts against the U.S. government.
Yeah, but they're in El Salvador at this point.
Well, right. What's different from a normal operation is that under the Alien Enemies Act, they don't get the opportunity to protest the facts before the deportation proceeding happens. But I think on the general basis, Kristi Noem's video, I saw no problem with it, outside of any, due process concerns or debates about that, because to me this is, one, a message to Americans that the administration is doing the job that they promised, and two, it's a message to other would-be illegal aliens or people who are in the country currently illegally that they're not going to tolerate it anymore. And the New York Times has an article out this morning pointing out that this sort of public affairs side of the deportation proceedings is working quite well in terms of self-deportation, writing recent border crossers are much more likely to consider departing. I interviewed several young men from Venezuela who were among them. They see footage of shackled migrants shuffled onto deportation planes. They watch the videos of more than 200 Venezuelan men accused by the Trump administration of gang affiliation being flown to a mega prison in El Salvador. Rather than risk subjecting themselves to that ordeal, they want to leave on their own terms. Great, saves us money, saves us manpower, get out.
I think that there is some common sense reality that obviously hardening the border and being more rigorous in how immigration policy is conducted discourages immigration. The danger I would see that when you get as far as the Kristi Noem example is that I think you're effectively dehumanizing people, and the dehumanization then extends beyond people who are Tren de Aragua members to people who are either wrongfully deported, protesting their deportation, or are actually here legally and have committed no crime at all.
Yeah, I guess I am skeptical of the idea that the dehumanization spreads to all immigrants or all illegal immigrants. For me, it's reminiscent of in 2019 when Trump was in the Oval Office and he was talking about members of the MS-13 gang, which we opened the segment with, and he referred to them as animals. And of course, these are people whose motto was kill, rape, control, or rape, control, kill. Can't remember the exact order, not sure it matters.
Right.
But the media took those statements out of context and accused him of talking about all immigrants, similar to when he first started his campaign back in 2015. Saying that there were rapists and murderers who were coming across the southern border, and added some, I assume, are good people. And the line was that Trump thinks Mexicans are rapists. And so I think that conflation is something that sparks a lot of backlash from the American people, who are quite happy to see alleged criminals and gang members deported, don't mind calling people who chop people up with machetes animals, but also don't subscribe to the idea that just because you talk about those people in that way, that means that you view every single person who's come into the country illegally that way.
I think that a lot of the argument about his language gets complicated because he does use terms like vermin or poisoning the blood of our country. And poisoning the blood, I think, does get into very, very sinister territory about genetics and races and racism and all of that, and I think it is problematic. But
All right.
we will agree to disagree. Up next, we have an insider's take on moving federal workers out of the nation's capital. Stick with us for that.